Okay, so we're recording now. So speak loud so that they can hear it, but I'll repeat it if it's not loud enough.
So you said that we need consent for that last question you asked us about.
We need consent from the IRB.
Just consent from the IRB, and we don't have to get consent from the actual religious.
Well, the IRB, so the question is, let's say you wanted to study a private religious organization, okay? Now you don't want to influence their behavior, okay? But the question is, do you need IRB approval for that? So number one, yes, I would always get IRB approval. It's usually fairly easy. A lot of times they think about things that you don't think about. So for instance, I had one group, and I used to allow you guys to pick your own questions, but sometimes you pick questionable questions, and I was like, this doesn't even make sense. So that's why I'm picking the question this time. But in one case, the student said, well, I'm really bugged when I go to the library and people are playing video games and there's no free computers. So I would like to do a study and see what percent of computers in the computer lab are legitimate things and what are not. Okay, sounded like a good study, right? Okay, so they sent that into the IRB, and the IRB was like, well, you might want to be careful about that. And I thought this was a really strange example, but what if they are doing an academic study of porn? And you walk by and there's big porn, and you're like, oh, they're not doing any work. You don't know what they're doing. Okay. Now, the reality is, I don't know why anybody would be checking out porn on the library computers, but whatever, it could happen. And so sometimes they think there's things that you don't think about. So they just said, be careful. And also, what if somebody, a stranger's walking up behind you, checking out your computer screen, you're like, what are you doing? Get out of my face, I'm gonna punch you in the nose, okay? This is a privacy thing. So they do bring up some things that you don't think about, okay? And so that's the purpose of getting the IRB approval. Now, they may or may not say, well, as part of the approval process, you need to go to this ultra-conservative political group and find out if it's okay with them. Like with the yawning thing, we don't want them to know. We want to just observe them. So going to the IRB, they will let you know, do you need to get approval from the group, or is it okay and you're just observing and it's okay? And so there's two different issues of there's IRB approval and then there's consent, okay? The IRB can work with you and tell you if you need to get consent from the group beforehand. But you should still go to the IRB, and they can say, yes, you need consent, or no, you don't need consent. Does that make sense? So those are two different issues, okay? But yes, I would definitely go to the IRB no matter what. Question?
I think that's where the question was confusing, because it asked if you need consent, not IRB available on the quiz.
Okay.
Like just for future tests, everybody needs consent. Well, you don't need consent from the subjects, but you should almost always get IRB approval, and that's why I was kind of because maybe you do, maybe you don't, but you should go to the IRB first, and I'll kind of let you know.
Yeah, so when you go to the IRB, you should say whether you want to get consent or not. And you may say, well, we don't think we need consent because it's a public meeting. And they're going to say, well, we still want you to do that. Because remember, IRB can require stricter rules than federal law. Federal law, I know I said this last time, federal law said dead people don't have privacy anymore. You can read the records or whatever. But we had a hospital in New York and said, if the person dies, you still need to get consent to be in the group. So, and I also had other IRBs. One in Illinois was like, no, they died, it's fine. Federal law says it's okay, it's okay. So yeah, IRBs can rule differently. It's not going to be consistent. So you really need to go to the IRB and see, what do you think about this? And every IRB may answer differently. Okay. Yes.
So like basically just telling us when in doubt, go to the IRB.
When in doubt, go to the IRB.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So even simple things like polls, anytime you do a poll as a university, you're gonna need to go to the IRB. So, and in fact, that does bring up, I was hoping to have it ready today, but I'll have it ready today, not for class. But you guys are going to need to fill out an IRB form. So here's what I would like to do. Well, I'll show it to you probably next time because I want to get going on in class. But you all have the same question, so that's going to be fine. The only major things that I want you to do when you fill out the IRB form is, especially on like the social media poll, how are you going to protect people's privacy? Okay, and also with the phone book, you're going to know if you're using a phone book and you're randomly dialing people, you're going to know their name and their phone number. How are you going to keep that information private? Okay, so the idea here is you need to send it to me, and then if I approve it, pretty much the IRB will approve it. Okay, so I will have you send it to me, and I'll say you didn't tell me enough on how you're keeping the data private. Okay. So like on social media, you may want to say, well, here's a link. We're going to make an anonymous poll. That's easy. But how are you going to keep the data private for phone numbers? Because you're going to know who you're calling. Okay? And I don't want you to just pick random people on your cell phone. I want you to use a phone book. Random people on your cell phone are not random. They're your friends and family. Okay? They're not random. Okay? So I want you to pick random people. Yes?
So will that be for every poll that we do, or every poll that there is, like how we have like the poll, social media, phone book, or are we going to do that just for the one that we chose, that we're actually doing? Because we split up into groups. Does that make sense?
I'm not really, but let me answer this way. You're splitting them up into groups. Each group is going to have to keep their data private and tell me how you're going to ensure privacy of the people that you're calling.
For all of
For all 5 collection methods. That's correct. So anonymity is a great thing. You can do that most of the time. Like if you're doing a cluster sample or whatever, just make it anonymous, piece of cake. But if you're doing the phone poll and if you're doing a social media poll, a lot of times those are tagged to your friends. So you'll know what your friends answered. Okay. So that's where you have to be a little bit more careful. How are you going to ensure that you keep their data private? Okay. So I will post that probably this afternoon. So I'll have you turn that in. And then once I approve everybody's thing, I'll also ask you for your group members' names. Then I will send it to the IRB. They usually take a week or 2, which is why we do this early in the semester. Sometimes they take a month to approve them, but they, except for the one where the guy was looking at computer screens, I've never had them really come back and say anything, because I decided it's better just to have me say the question than you guys ask really weird questions sometimes.
Okay, just last question. When is that form going to be due? Is that going to be due?
In a week. A week from today.
Wait, so we need to send to you how we're going to do the study, and then we got to get approval, then we can do the study. You're saying we have to wait.
Yeah. So here's what needs to be turned in. You're going to need to. I'm going to have a form that's going to have the directions on it that has your group members' names. Piece of cake. I'm going to have an IRB form that you also. Okay. So that city number that you took from your city course, that needs to be on the IRB form. Okay. Everybody's name needs to be signed. I'm going to cover that. I might give you more than a week to do this. I want to make sure, because we're going to run out of time today. I will say this, we're going to do a lot of graphing today, so all these graphing techniques you're going to want to use on your final project, okay? So at any rate, don't worry about it. I'm not going to force you guys, and a lot of you are going to turn in bad forms, and I'm going to say redo it. So as long as you redo it, you'll get full credit. But think about how you're going to guard people's private data. Okay, that's the biggest reason why your proposal will get rejected by me. Once you've got it satisfied, I will send it to the IRB, and they will either send me or you guys confirmation that it's been approved. Okay. Yeah. All right. So let's move on to chapter 1 here. Okay, so I do have a few vocabulary things I want to cover. All right. So we're going to talk about chapter 1, which is graphs, good and bad. Okay? So let's talk about statistics. Statistics is the science of data, and it's often more art than science. How we define things affects our conclusions. Okay? Now, let me give you a quick example here. I used to work on a brain injury study. One of the things that we wanted to know was, how did people get their brain injury? Was it a car accident? Was it a football injury? Was it a boating accident? Did they fall off a cliff or a building or whatever? Lots of ways people can get injured with a head injury, okay? So you would think that was a nice, easy thing to answer, right? Okay, so I got a call from our Atlanta hospital, and she said, I'm not sure how to classify this injury. Let me tell you what happened. The person was standing in the back of a pickup truck, holding a mattress. The pickup truck crashed. Person fell out of the pickup truck, hit their head on a rock. Is that a motor vehicle accident because it involves a pickup truck, or is it a fall because they fell out of the truck and hit their head? So let me ask you, you're me. How many of you think that's a motor vehicle accident? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. How many think that's a fall? One? Just one? Usually it's more even than that. Okay? Have we done it before? So I told you this? Oh, I didn't realize. I repeat this in every class, so I don't know what you're saying. But anyway. Yeah, so you know that the government can't help you either, right? OSHA says it's a fall. National Highway Transportation Safety Administration says it's a motor vehicle accident. So, all right. So let's talk about some other terms, okay? Talk about individuals. These are objects defined by data. Okay? They could be people, but they don't have to be people. They could be families, they could be rocks, birds, you know, whatever you're collecting. Okay? We also have a variables, which is any characteristic of an individual. Okay? Let's talk about a population, which is the entire set of individuals we want information on. And we've got a sample, which is a subset of the population. And we try to draw conclusions about population from the sample. Okay? All right, we've also got, and I'm going to put this here, a parameter, which is the true value of the population. And it's usually unknown.
So I'm pretty sure it did all of these.
Did we do this?
Yeah.
Oh, this is weird. I don't remember doing this.
We went from population through census, sample parameters, statistics, simple random sample, voluntary response, stratified sample.
Well, good. We can spend more time on the computer. All right. So, did we talk about quantitative variables?
No.
No. You said well, a little bit, but you said you'd go over it more.
Okay, quantitative variables involve numbers, involve numerical, well, I'll say numerical categories. And we've got qualitative or categorical. Well, qualitative are categorical variables. Okay, so let me do this. It's the problem when you teach the same class over and over, you don't remember what you said before. All right, so go ahead and open up Excel. All right. So we're going to do, I'm going to turn this so I can see. So when you guys are collecting your data, you may collect information like this. Now, all right, so I've got a name, Fiona Apple, Carl Malone, George Bush, Stephen Hawking, and Oprah Winfrey. Okay, all right, now I am going to teach you hopefully everything you need to know. We're recording this, so if I go too fast, you can stop and start and rewind and go back. Okay, now notice your mouse here. I've got a white cross. You can see this white cross here. Now, depending on where I am, it's going to change shape. So for example, if I go over to this box over here, notice it changes from a white cross to white or a black 4 arrows. If I put it right on the corner, it changes from 4 arrows to a black cross. If I put it in between columns A and B, it changes it into there. And so if you click, you can drag and you can make that as big or as small as you want. If you double click, it will resize it to whatever's the longest thing in that column. Okay? So let's talk about the major. We got music and we got athletics. We got political science. We got physics. And we got communications. Okay? I'm going to resize. Oh, and by the way, notice how it's a down arrow now. You could select the entire column if you want, but I want to put it in between. I'll double click. Points, I've got 397 points, 323, 446, 405, and 461. For grades, I've got B, C, A, B, A. Okay? So, just really quickly, I really wish I knew people's names better. Let's pick on, tell me your name.
Kensley.
Kensley. So, what are the individuals in this data set? Fiona Apple, Carmelone, these are your individuals here, okay? How many variables do we have? It's, I don't know. Shire. How many variables do I have? 6? How are you getting 6? What are the variables? Major is a variable. Just major is a variable. Points is another variable, and grade is the third variable. So we've only got 3 variables. Okay? All right. Now, let's see here. Don't talk about that. Okay. So, so what I'm going to recommend is when you're collecting your data, you probably are going to want to collect it in Excel. Now, you may choose to just say, you know, you're probably going to want to collect gender. Are they male or female? You're probably going to want to collect, are they Republican or Democrat or maybe independent? That sort of a thing. Let's see here. I can't remember if I put this up here. We're going to find out right now. If I go back to, oh, it's not here. Canvas. Oh, this takes too long. I only need one. All right. Math 1040. Let's see here. Assignments. In-class worksheets. Okay. I think I want to open up worksheet 2.1. Perfect. This is the right one. Okay, go ahead and enable editing. Now, let me just mention to you really quickly, down at the bottom, you've got different things here. We're going to talk about different types of graphs. When we get to the test, which will probably be in a couple of weeks, make sure that when you're taking your graph that you check all of your sheets to make sure you've done them all. Don't do the first problem and say, oh, that was a short test. Okay? There's probably going to be multiple sheets. Okay? So let's talk about, a physical therapist wants to know the types of therapy required by patient. Create a table with a relative frequency. Okay? Maybe I should mention those things. Let's talk about some terms here before we go into here. Stop sharing. There we go. Okay, perfect. All right. So we're going to talk about, I got to turn this again. All right. I'm just going to erase this. A frequency histogram. Frequency. Okay, frequency distribution. Let's talk about that first. Okay, basically you count the items in each category.
What's the DIST stand for?
Distribution. Okay. We're also going to do a relative frequency distribution. Okay. And that's going to be a percent of items in each category. Okay. We're also going to talk about a cumulative frequency distribution. Okay, I abbreviated that, but that's cumulative. And that's the sum of all items above and we're going to talk about a cumulative relative frequency distribution, which is the sum of all percents above. And let me show you what I mean by that. Okay? You always move up. I don't know why you sit in the back.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm sitting in the back too.
Okay? All right. So let's go back to our spreadsheet here. Okay? So what I've got here is, let's say we're trying to track the types of injuries that show up at a physical therapist's office. Okay? So we've got 12 back injuries, 2 wrist injuries, 1 elbow, 2 hips, etc., etc. Okay? So what we've got here, this is exactly what we're going to call a frequency distribution. You just count them up and you put them in each one of the categories. Okay? Now, what I want to do is I want to come up with a relative frequency distribution. Okay? Relative frequency distribution is what? Either Brady or Braden, I can't remember. It's Brady, isn't it?
Yeah, Brady.
So what's the relative frequency distribution?
That's percentage of items in each category.
Percent of each item. So how would we figure out the percent of back injuries in this case?
You take your total.
You'd have to get your total. How? Okay, so I'm going to show you some cool Excel tricks. Okay. Now they've got this button over here. It looks like it has an E on it. That's the Greek letter sigma. Okay. And it says auto sum. So if you click that button, then Excel tries to guess and say, oh, I found some numbers here. Is this what you want me to add up? Sometimes it guesses right. Sometimes it guesses wrong. You can see this little kind of Las Vegas light show thing around here. Okay. It's guessing right this time. Do you want to add up this column? Yes, I do. We have 28 injuries here. Okay. So now let me show you how to do a formula here. So the first formula we have is anytime you start with a formula in Excel, you always have to start with an equals, so it knows you're doing a formula. So press the equals, and then with your mouse, you can click on the 12, and then you can hit slash for divide, and you can click on 28. Okay? Now you can see here it fills in the formula for you. You're doing B5 divided by B15 in this case. Okay? Does that make sense? And so then you press enter. Now I'm going to show you some cool things about Excel before we continue on, okay? So some cool commands that you're going to want to know. Control C equals copy, Control X equals cut, and Control V equals paste. Now you'll notice those keys are all next to each other on your keyboard. CX and V are all next to each other on the bottom row of your keyboard. So that's an easy way to remember. I'm also going to talk about F4, the F4 key. Now, looks like you all are using the computers here. Does anybody have a Mac? A few people have a Mac. If you're doing this at home, you don't have an F4 key. But F4 stands for absolute. And I'm going to put a $sign through the as absolute reference. Okay? If you're using a Mac, I've been told that the command T does the same thing. Okay? Now, I'm going to be focusing mainly on Windows because that's how the tests are going to be written and that's what you're going to use in the testing center. So remember the F4 key is an absolute reference. And the idea with an absolute reference means it does not change. Okay? We also have what's called a relative reference. And a relative reference changes. Okay? Ooh, I'm at the bottom of the screen there. Okay? All right, so let's jump back to Excel for a minute. And I'll explain the difference between an absolute and a relative reference. Okay? So you go back here to Excel, you say, gosh, that was such a nice formula. I would like to copy it. And so I'm going to highlight the formula I have, and I'm going to press Control C. It does a little Las Vegas light show to know that that's what you're copying. And then if you go down, you can either use your mouse or sometimes it's easier with your keyboard if you go down one. And if you hold the Shift key down, you can highlight the cells all the way down to row 13. And then you can say Control V to paste. And it says division by 0, which kind of sucks, right? Okay. Now, you may be saying, well, that first formula was right. Why didn't the second formula work? So I'm going to go down to the second formula. And if I go here, you can see that it highlights it for you. The formula change, I want the 2, but then it says divided by B16. Well, B16 is this empty spot here. So it's dividing by 0. Okay? So the idea here is I wanted this first number to change, but I want the second number to stay the same. Okay? So I'm going to go back to this first formula that I had that worked right. Okay? And so I'm going to press F4. I want that B15 not to change. I always want to divide by cell B15. I always want to divide by 28 in this case. Okay? Now, so the first number, B5, you can see it here. B5 is what we call a relative reference. We want that to change. B15 is the absolute reference. We want that not to change. Okay? So I'm going to press enter, and you'll notice it doesn't look like I did anything. I got the exact same number I got before. However, this time I can press Control C, and now when I highlight my data and I press Control V to paste, it works. I got data. Now, what should this column add up to if I did it correctly? 1 or 100%. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to press the auto sum button, and that adds up to 1, so I did it correctly. Okay? Now I'm teaching you these shortcuts so that you don't have to spend 4 hours in the testing center. You can if you want. But if you want to get out of there a little faster, you're going to want to learn some of these shortcuts, okay? I could have also typed it in 1 divided by 28, 2 divided by 28, 3 divided by 28, but I don't want to do that, okay? All right, so the important thing is, guess what? On your test, you can't use a calculator. You have to use Excel on the computer test. Remember, we have 2-part tests. One part, you can use your calculator on the written test. The computer part, no calculators. So I want to see your calculations, okay? So this is going to be important to learn. All right, now let's talk about the cumulative frequency distribution. So the cumulative frequency basically says it's the sum of all items above. So I want the sum of all back injuries and above, okay? So I'm going to press equals. I'm going to go over here to 12 because there's nothing above 12, okay? So this first number is exactly the same, 12. The second number, I want to know how many wrist and back injuries. So I'm going to press equals, and I'm going to click on the 2 plus the 12, okay? So 2 plus 12 equals 14. Okay? Now, if I did this right, I'm going to show you another way to copy and paste. Notice my mouse. If I click it on the corner here, if I put it right here on the corner, notice it changes into that black cross. Okay? If I click and drag down, it will do a copy and a paste all in one step. And if I did it correctly, it should add up to 28. Okay? Pretty cool. I've stunned you all into silence. Okay? Can I do that again? Oh, by the way, Control Z is undo. That's another one I should have added on there. Control Z equals undo in case you do a mistake. Okay? And in fact, I'm going to do a mistake on purpose here. Let me show you something. This is something that people do incorrectly. They say, well, I want to add the 2 plus the 12. And that actually looks correct, okay? And it says 14, okay? But because I did the formula wrong, I'm going to click here. So put your mouse right on the corner. It's got to be on that little black square there. It comes into a black cross. If you go over too far, it goes into arrows. Or if you go too high, it's arrows. You don't want arrows. You want it to be a cross. And you're going to click and you're going to drag down. Now, did it add up to 28 this time? No, so I did it wrong. Okay? So the important thing is to remember, you need to add the 2 to the left plus the 12 that's above. Okay? Now, when I do that, and in fact, you can actually double click, it will copy down for you. Okay? So your cumulative frequency, when you get to the bottom of your table, should add up to the total number of, in this case, patients. Does that make sense? Okay, question, Gage.
I was just going to say, Control Y is, so if you accidentally backtrack, Control Y is another good one to know.
Yeah.
Because it'll push you forward.
Control Y is redo.
Yeah.
But Control Z and Control Y, those are great. Most people use Control Z more than Control Y, though.
Yeah.
Okay? All right, does that make sense? Yes.
So I got the 14, but then that's pretty much it.
And then it doesn't work?
Well, I'm just, and I also.
Okay, so. Yeah, you did it right, okay? This is correct. So you want to put that on the corner. Yeah.
And so then how do we?
Then I want you to put them, okay, so this one you want to add 4. It doesn't have one. You add 2 on that. No? Yeah, you did say this. So now I'm going to let you click that. Okay, any other questions on that?
I just have a question. How do you get the relative frequency? So right here.
Oh, okay, so you press equals. Yeah. And you click on slash to the right.
Yeah. Well, that's.
There we go.
Okay, so you did not press the other sum key here. So if you got other sum, you did not.
Yeah, that did that.
Okay, so I'm going to press that key.
Okay.
So it's about 28 there, yeah, text, it's not going to do that. Okay,
Okay, I'll do that and then.
and now you should be able to click and drag that down. Okay? Oh, except for you forgot that 4, so that's what I didn't want.
At 4.
That's 4, oh, second number. Control Z to undo. Or you can also press the undo, or using some.
Yeah, that's. Oh, undo right there.
Okay, now, so I go back to community.
See, then it didn't work.
Then because you do this too long. So you're usually gonna have dollar signs in yourself. Put dollar out, dollar B, dollar 15. In the formula. So come to, on that spot, come to 15. Oh, it's on there. Dollar B, dollar 15. Okay, are we good? Are you good? Okay. So just a reminder, the Excel online doesn't always work as good as the other ones, but if you use regular, in fact, if you use the computer, it'll work a lot better.
Okay, yeah.
Everything.
I'll do that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we always run out of time on these. Okay. Hopefully. Okay. So now let's do the relative cumulative frequency, and I'm going to have. Tell me your name on that. Riley. You're going to tell me what to do.
Okay.
Okay. What do I start with? You always start your formula with an equal sign. See, I knew you knew.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't be telling me you don't know when you know. Okay. Equals. And then what am I trying to add up? The cumulative relative frequency distribution is the sum of all percents above. Okay. So what are all the percents above back injuries?
Just what's in the relative frequency column?
Yeah. So this first one is just 42%, right? Okay. So the first one is just going to be equal C5, and then I'm going to press enter.
What's C5?
See how this is C, column C, row 5. Okay. Now the second one is going to be what? I'm going to start with an equals. Tell me what to click on.
You go back and add the one on C6.
The C6, which is 7%, right? I'm going to add the one above it, for the 42% that's above it. Okay. So if I add 42% plus 7%, that adds up to 50%. Okay, can I copy that second formula? I can click and drag it. If I put it right on the corner, are you really good at this now?
Yeah.
Clicking and dragging, good.
I can click and drag now.
And it adds up to 100% like it should, okay?
Great, I did it.
Isn't this a great class? You know, I've used Excel in every single job I've ever had. So if you've never used Excel before, you're gonna like this class. You might not like it, but it's a good skill. Okay? All right, now let's talk about types of graphs. Okay? If I wanted to create, now I've got a bunch of categories here, right? In Excel, you're going to highlight your data, and we're going to talk about a pie graph. So I'm going to click on Insert, and then I'm going to click on Pie Graphs. Now, by the way, they've got these 3D pie graphs. Don't ever use those unless you want to get not full credit, okay? The problem with 3D is they distort your data. We always like 2D graphs in my class, okay? Never ever use 3D graphs for anything. Remember that on your final project because it's being recorded, okay? I said that never, never, never 3D graphs, okay? So don't forget, okay? We're going to do a 2D graph, and you can see here, these are the types of injuries, okay? Now, let me just make a note here. We probably want to change that title. Maybe I would change it to types of injuries at a PT clinic. Okay? Notice it's got it's got a nice legend here for back, wrist, elbow, hip, etc., etc. Okay. Now, on the quiz on Tuesday, I am not going to make it's not going to be a computer quiz. However, the test is going to be on the computer. Most of your graphing will probably be done on a computer, but can you graph this by hand if you had to? Okay. I'll probably make you do a bar graph. Let's do the same thing this time. I want to do a relative frequency bar graph. Relative frequency means what? Percents, okay? So here's how we're going to do this. Actually, before I do that, let me just mention this really quickly. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment, okay? All right, I need to erase this. Okay. Now, back injuries, wrist injuries, all that stuff, that is what we would call categorical or qualitative data, right? So you can use, so for categorical data, use a pie or a bar graph. Okay, now, a lot of times pie graphs and bar graphs are interchangeable, but the pie graph must add to 100%. The bar graph, not necessarily. Okay? Anything that adds to 100%, you can use either a pie or a bar, and it's usually more of a personal choice on that. Okay? We're also going to talk about a histogram. It's like a bar graph with, number one, it's got numerical data, numerical categories, meaning quantitative. Okay, so remember, for categorical data, it's going to be a bar graph, but a histogram, you're going to have numerical categories. Number two, the bars must touch. Number three, they must be equally sized categories. Number four, they can't overlap. Is there anything else on there? That's all I can remember for the moment. Okay. All right, so let's go back to here and we'll talk about this, okay? Now, share my screen. Okay, so I could also create a bar graph with this. This time I want to do a relative frequency bar graph. What's your question?
Equally sized, what is that?
Equally sized categories. CAT, categories. Okay? All right, so now here's what you want to do. We're going to do a relative frequency bar graph. Relative frequency means it's percent, okay? So I'm going to highlight the body part, and when you're doing this, make sure that you include the category name here. Press the control, hold the control key down, and highlight this relative frequency column. Okay, so that's how you can highlight two columns that aren't together. Okay, is with the control key. Now I'm going to go to Insert, and I'm going to click on Bar, and I'm going to do a 2D bar graph. Okay, I'm going to move my pie graph down for a moment. Okay, and then we could maybe give it a good title like percents of injuries at a PT clinic. Okay, now you may wonder, what does these decimals mean, right? So in order to fix that, click on this green plus sign, and we're going to add axis titles. Okay, if I add the axis titles here, I'm going to type in percent here. Okay, and on this axis title down here, I'm going to put body part. Okay. Now, another thing that you can do is you can highlight your data just like this. You can click on the home button, and then you can click on the percent, and watch what happens to the graph when I click on percent. Changes everything to a percent. And if you want to add a decimal, you can click on this button here. You could add another decimal there. Okay? So that's pretty cool. All right.
How did you do that last time?
So you highlight your data just like here. You click on the percent button right here. And then if you want to add a decimal, you click on this button here. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Let me see here. What else I want to talk about? Okay. Now let me just mention another thing here. Let's create another type of a bar graph here. I'm going to click on this thing that says 2 sets of data down here. Okay. Here's what I want to do is I want to create a bar graph with these. Now I want you to notice, okay, if I click on it, actually let's have somebody talk me through it. Tell me your name on the second row. Nicole. Can you tell me how to make a bar graph out of these two? Insert. And I can click on the bar graph. Now, by the way, you may want to choose, we could do this here. We'll never do the 3D, right? You could also do a horizontal bar graph. That's just a personal preference here. I'm going to click on that just to be a little bit different. But there's a mistake on this graph. Okay, let's pretend I've actually added axis titles, which I haven't done. What is the mistake that you see? Does anybody see a mistake on the graph? Yes, tell me your name. Lindsay.
The two bars should be.
Say it again.
The two different bars, each color bars should be coinciding with the years, but they're on the.
Yeah, they should be coinciding with the years. It says Series 1, Series 2. They graph the education. What's education? Those are my titles here. It's not supposed to graph that data. Okay? So if you're not paying attention, there's a problem there. Okay? Go ahead and delete that graph. Here's how you're going to fix that, okay? If you go over here to 1990, put an apostrophe in front of the 1990, okay? When you do that, watch what happens to your 1990. It's going to go to the left, okay? And it's also got a green thing. If you click on this little yellow thing here, it says the number is stored as text, which in this case is what we want to do, okay? Do the same thing with 2006. Put an apostrophe in front of the 2, okay? And now, when we graph this, insert bar graph to the, well, we'll use this one here, okay? Now, notice my legend properly has 1990 and 2006, okay? I'll add this. This is the education in a state. And we've got our years. Maybe you would want to add an axis title here. You can put here number of students, and then you can put education level. Okay? All right. We always run out of time way too quickly. We kind of talked about histograms, but I'll save that for next class. Okay? So on Tuesday, I thought we were meeting in 207. We'll find out if that's really true. I'll let you know over the weekend.
I think you signed up for this past Tuesday. Is that on there?
No, I signed up for today and the following Tuesday. She screwed up. It wasn't me. I'll show you the email. But at any rate, so I'm going to tell her we weren't there on Tuesday. We will be in one of these rooms here next Tuesday. We'll talk about histograms. Histograms are going to be very important, and bar graphs and pie graphs for your final project. So make sure you learn these skills. You're going to use these again. Your final project, one of the things you're going to notice about it, it's going to wrap up a lot of these skills that you're learning now. And you can kind of think of it like a final exam, but it's only 10% of your grade. Okay? It's a good study for the final exam. Okay? So don't forget these skills. Yes?
So the homework's just to do the homework on the chapter.
So the homework is a really good question. Work mainly on the pie graphs and the bar graphs. I think I have that broken down on there. But so your quiz on Monday is going to be on pie graphs and bar graphs and frequency histograms and relative, not histograms, frequency distributions, relative frequency distributions, cumulative, that sort of a thing.
So do we still need to do chapter 1?
So do as much as you can of chapter 1.
Okay.
I'll still ask you how much you completed, but we're going to spend 2 days on chapter 1.
Okay.
Just so you know. So it's an honor thing. Just make sure you fill that out. How much of the pie graphs and bar graphs did you complete? Did you complete all the problems is what I'm going to ask.
Do you want us to complete that after our second day of chapter 1?
Would you guys rather do that?
That way we would be able to complete all of it and then tell you how
Yeah,
much.
we'll probably finish it. So, okay, so I won't ask you how much homework you completed, but I will say this, practice so that you don't spend 4 hours in the testing center because you didn't know how to do what you're doing. You're just staring at a blank spreadsheet, okay? All right, so see y'all on Tuesday. We will have a quiz on Tuesday on pie graphs, bar graphs, frequency distribution, relative frequency, all that stuff. On paper. Okay?
So the practice that we're supposed to be doing is on paper or just on the computer?
You should, the quiz will be on paper, but you should practice on the computer anyway, even though it won't be on the quiz.
So we still have to do the problems listed on the syllabus, homework. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are those problems that you listed, are they to do on